Hi there, I'm Matt Pro. I'm the Director of Technology at Elmwood School. It's Wednesday of the first week back to school since the lockdown that happened over Christmas. And one of the things that our school had to have in place before we could come back based on the Ontario Ministry was a list of students who had or had not completed the morning self-check. We're not allowed to let them in the building unless they have done that check. And so I thought I'd create a quick video for anyone who hasn't had to go back yet to explain how we did that. We did it all using Google Sheets and Forms, and it's all without any fancy extensions, pretty straightforward. Anyway, I'll walk you through how we did that in case it's something your school is struggling to do. Here we go. It's great that we have Google here at Elmwood, and this makes this process really easy. If you created a Google form before, you know it's a simple process. And so all I've done is mirrored our Ottawa Public Health questions and the logic built into their form. There are different forms for different regions. So we're following Ottawa Public Health, so it might be slightly different than wherever you are in your region. And so it has some questions such as, have you traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days? And if you say, yep, I have, then you should not attend school. And if you say no, then you get the next question, which is about physical contact and being in close physical contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19. Simple, straightforward to make the form, if you know how to make forms. It's really important, though, that when you make your form, all of our students here at Elmwood have an Elmwood email address that is tied to their Google account. So it's really important to change the settings on your form so that it collects email addresses, that it sends a response receipt so the students get that in their email. They know they've filled it out properly, that it always sends it. And you're going to restrict it to people within your own domain so that no one outside of your users can fill it out, because those are the people who are allowed in your building. That makes tracking this much more simple. If you allow people to type their own names, their own email addresses, they'll make mistakes. So you don't want that. No mistakes. All right. Let's walk through how we do the logic of the form. Okay, so here's my form. My first question is about, have you traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days? And that's just a multiple choice question. And then we're going to create different sections based on your answer. And then we'll add some logic to the form so that it flows and gives the students the right answer. So if they have traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days, according to the federal government, they cannot come to school. So we're going to add a section here. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to make it simply say, you may not come to school. And then if there are specific recommendations from the federal government, I might paste that down here. So now we're going to go to this multiple choice question. We're going to build some logic around it so that the form flows from one spot to the other. So we're going to say, go to section based on answer. And we're going to make sure it's a required question. And I'm going to say, instead of continue to next section, I'm going to have it go to, you may not come to school if they say yes. So if they've been traveling in the last 14 days, they cannot come to school. If they say no, however, we're going to have them go on to the next question, which is about physical contact. So when I preview this form now, it asks them the question, have you traveled outside of Canada? You'll notice it's capturing my email address here. Have you traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days? Yes. Next. You may not come to school. However, if I say no, then it takes me on to the next section, which is about close physical contact with someone else who's tested positive for COVID-19. And again, we build the logic in much the same way. I just recommend looking up whatever tests or questionnaire you have to go through in your area and mirroring that exactly. There's, after the simple yes and no questions, we get to a section based on the Ottawa Public Health that is a little more complicated. It's got a list of symptoms. So if you have any one of these symptoms in Ottawa, you're not to come to school. So that's fever, chills, cough, etc. And so again, what I would have loved to have done is had it so if the student checked one of these things and then said next that some logic could be built in that goes to a section based on that. And built into Google Forms, there is no go to a section based on your response. And so instead, I just stuck another multiple choice question underneath that is required that says I have no or one or more of symptoms of the above symptoms, and it goes to a section that says you can't come to school based on that, or they say none of the above. And we have sort of two sections in Ottawa anyway for how symptoms are handled with students. And so that continues on to the next one. There's probably some way to do this with a fancy plugin. I don't know what it is, and you're probably smarter than me, so you can figure it out. This is the completed form. You go through. Have you traveled outside of Canada? No. Have you been in close physical contact with someone who has COVID-19? No. Have you been in close physical contact with someone who's traveled in the last 14 days? No. Have you been in close physical contact with someone who has any of the symptoms of COVID-19? No. And then you go through symptoms. Do I have any of these? If I say yes, I should also say I have one or more here, and it's going to say don't go to school. But I'm going to go back and say I have none of these. None. Next. And then finally, the logic in Ottawa is students who have to have two of these to go get a COVID test. If they have one of them, they should stay home for 24 hours and wait for that symptom to go away. But I'm going to say I have none of those symptoms. Here I've built some logic. I have one or more. I have two or more. I have none of the above. And that goes to 3 different pages. And then finally, and this is the step that some people have forgotten on the first on the first day, second day, far fewer people forgot. You got to hit submit at the end of the form. Maybe there's a way around that too. You might know. All right, so that all dumps to this spreadsheet. Here we are. We can see I've just filled out the spreadsheet here. And you can see all my answers are here. Now, one thing you might say, oh, that's annoying. It's just an email address, and I can't see which students are associated with that. So this is just all the form responses get dumped into here every day. Every time the form is filled out, it just adds to the bottom, and this list gets ever longer. So you might think, well, that's daunting to check through at the door. What am I going to do? So here's what you do. The first thing is you get a list of all your students that you have to check. So I believe it's all students grade 9 through 12 have to go through this check. So here you go. I've made a short list of students that it tells me their grade over here in this column, their email address, and then their name. And so we can build a list where we draw all the data from our form response with the students' actual names and create a list. But before we do that, this form response, like I said, is going to get filled in day after day after day. So the first thing we have to do is filter it. So I've created a tab here called Today, and I built a query in here, and I'll paste the code on the screen in a second. But you can actually use SQL queries within a spreadsheet in Google Sheets, which is pretty powerful. So here I'm just saying select from my form response tab, and I'm selecting column A and B and C and D and E and F and G through J, where A, that's the timestamp, is not null, so that I don't accidentally import blank data, and today equals, and then we're just looking for anything that is today. That's what this code means. So this is anyone who's filled out the form today. Okay, great. We've got that. We have our list of all our students in the school. So what do we do with it? We got to put it together. So here we have a tab which I've just called SS, which is for senior school, but it's basically all of my today data tied together with the student's actual name. And here's what it looks like. So it shows me the student's name, their email address, the grade they're in. If they've completed the form today, that's what that 1 means. So here's how we do that. So again, I'm going to use a query, and I'm going to say I want to pull in a list from my All Students tab, where I'm selecting column A, B, D, and E. where A is not null, and E, we're going to say is greater than 8. So on my actual form, I'm actually pulling in, I have an auto-generated form that actually goes out and seeks out all of my Google users and pulls that down. I don't want to get into that because it's more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm just saying, get all the students who are where their grade is greater than 8. That's what this means. Okay, so it's grade 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I'm going to order it first by the grade that they're in, and then by their name. Okay, so that pulls everything in up to their grade. Then we want to find out, okay, did they complete the form today? And so I have a silly little formula here that just says, okay, look at the today tab and check to see if somewhere in the today tab there is this email address from B2. And if there is, count 1. So I'm just counting if I see this appear in my today tab. And then I'm doing some conditional formatting over here that turns that kid's name green if they've completed it. Incidentally, green means they've completed the form and have no symptoms. Red means they've completed the form and they have one of the symptoms that means they should not be allowed at school, and they're notified of that, so we haven't had a problem of students showing up, but you want to catch them at the door if they do. And finally, orange means that they haven't filled out the form yet, and so again, they can't come through the door until they've filled out the form. So let me, so there's today. So that goes through, we can see, okay, Lauren Lawrenson has not filled out the form. If we look here at our today tab, we're seeing no instance of her email address appearing, and therefore it's counted as 0, and she needs to fill in the form. So when I'm standing at the door, I can ask Lauren to step aside, grab her phone, and fill out the form. Okay, we're then pairing that with the data that we pulled in from about what they've completed. So if you look over here, in addition on my Today tab, we see all the things that they've completed. So there's the kid's email address, and then have they traveled? Yes. Okay, and it's pulling all this over, and it just does that with a simple VLOOKUP formula, and an array formula. So it's basically just saying, okay, if B2, which is the kid's email address, is in the today form somewhere between B and J, pull over all of these columns. So it's pulling over column 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9. Again, I'll share all this code, and it puts it all over here. So that's how that works. The last column here is just a simple series of AND statements. So the way that works is it wants to find out, can the kid come to school? So it says if F2, which is where they've traveled, equals no, and G2 equals no, and H2 equals no, and I2 equals no, and J equals nothing, meaning no symptoms, and K2 equals none of the above symptoms, and L2 equals nothing, meaning they haven't checked off any symptoms, and M2 equals I have no symptoms, then true, they can come to school. But if one of those is flagged, false, they may not come to school today. And over here, we built in some conditional formatting that does the following. If the thing in the far right column says false, then it colors it red. And here's how that works. So it just looks through between A2 and A1000 and says, if N2 equals false, then paint the cell red. And this is just a quick visual way of whomever is watching the door letting students in to see if they should let the student in or not. Similarly, if A2 through 1000, if the E column has a number greater than 1, that means they filled in the form. They might have filled it in twice. We've seen that happen a couple of times. And then it gives them green. But this only gets applied after this one. So them having a symptom, that takes precedence over this because of the order that these fall in. And finally, if they haven't filled out the form, that means this is 0, and therefore it paints it orange just as a caution. We got to stop this kid and ask them to fill out the form before they can come in the school. Finally, we have a tab that is maybe the most efficient way of checking students at the door, and that is the students who haven't filled out the form. So here we can see Lauren Lawrenson has not filled in her form, and also Quinn Quinson has not filled out her form. And the way we're doing that is we are simply running another SQL query where we're looking in the senior school tab and we're just selecting column A and B and C and D and E, where A, first of all, is not null. That means that it's been completed, and where column E, that's the one that counts the number of times they filled out the form today, is less than 1. Okay, so if it's 0, then they appear here on our list. And again, this is just about what grade they're in. And then we're ordering that by D, which is first their grade, and then we're ordering it by their name. So it'll sort first by grade and then by name. And so we have people standing at the door looking basically at these two tabs, checking every single student who walks through the door to make sure that their name isn't red, which means they have a symptom, or orange, which means they haven't filled in the form. We've created some QR codes that take them directly to the form. They can scan those on the outside of the building with their phone, fill out the form, and then their name instantly turns green or red, I suppose, although we haven't had that happen, and they do what they're supposed to do. So that's how that works. So let me just show you real quick. I'll fill in this form here, and let's make it so that we can see the form updating. We'll see Lauren Lawrenson will be able to come to school. So right now she's on our list, she's not filled it out properly. Maybe she got to the end and forgot to hit submit, a problem we saw a bit on our first day. And here we can say Lauren Lawrenson is orange, meaning, again, she hasn't filled it out. That's also what these NA things means. It means it can't find any data for that. Okay, so let's do that now. Lauren Lawrenson, has she been outside of Canada? No. Has she been in close physical contact with someone with COVID-19? No. Has she been in close physical contact with someone who's been outside of Canada in the last 14 days? No. Has she been in close physical contact with someone who has COVID-19 symptoms? No. Does she have any of these symptoms? No. And any of these ones? None. Next. And submit. And because our form updates live, there's Lauren Lawrenson. She's green because she can come to school and because she has filled out the form. There you go. That's how it works. Here's the last thing I did. So my last piece of advice is not to share this spreadsheet with anyone, because sometimes people, as clever as they are, make mistakes and ruin things. And so instead of sharing that, I shared only what they needed to see on a day-to-day basis of the people who are monitoring entrance to the school. And so we have a spreadsheet that just pulls the data and is then shared view only with the people who need to see it. And so the way I do that is simply using the import range function with the URL, the specific URL to the Google Doc, and then which sheet and from which column to which other column we want to import. And that pulls it in here. And then when I share it with people, I want to share it as read only so that they can't edit anything, so no one can accidentally delete the formula when they're checking people at the door. The great thing about this is it refreshes in real time as students are filling out the form. And again, here's our not completed form, so we can see only one student today in our senior school has not filled it out. So let's go ahead and fill out the form as them, and one last time see that it updates here also on our read-only form that no one can ruin. So here we go. I'm going to fill it out, submit another response. Here we go. Have you traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days? Sure have. Can't come to school. You should not attend school. Blah, blah, blah. Submit. Check back. Here again, we're on the spreadsheet that can't be destroyed, the one people are using to check at the door. We can see, no one is on the list. So everyone has filled out the form, and when I look here at Quinn Quinson, I can see that she is red and therefore cannot come to school. I hope that was a helpful video and that you can figure out how to track COVID-19 self-checks in the morning at your school as well. If you don't have Google, I'm sure there's probably a way to do this with the MS Office suite. I don't know if it has the same flexibility with live updating and all that, but anyway, good luck.